Tonight, we confront the terrifying possibility that the void you imagine before the dawn of time is a hallucination, born from the limitations of the human mind. If you close your eyes and try to envision the absolute beginning, you likely see a vast, silent darkness, an infinite room waiting for a light to be turned on. But this mental image is your first mistake, a biological safeguard that prevents your brain from collapsing under the weight of true non-existence. We are taught that the Big Bang was a birth, an explosion from a single point that created everything out of nothing. But the deeper modern cosmology goes, the more that nothing begins to resemble something far more ancient and disturbing. What if the void was never empty? What if the silence you imagine is actually a crowded, roiling sea of potential, and the nothing that came before was merely a dormant state of code waiting for a system initialization that we call the Big Bang? To understand what existed before the stars, we must first accept that our human brains were never designed to understand reality. They were only designed to help us survive it. Close your eyes and try to perform a mental excavation of the universe. Strip away the galaxies, the stars, and the planets until you are left with the deep black vacuum of space. Now go further. Remove the atoms, the stray hydrogen gas, and the distant fading light of long-dead suns. Most of us believe that if we keep digging, we will eventually hit a final wall of nothingness, a state of absolute, perfect silence. But this is where the hallucination of silence begins. In the uploaded documents, it is argued that the human definition of nothing is fundamentally broken because it is built on a series of hidden assumptions that the universe provides for us. When you imagine a void, you still imagine a space that is dark, but darkness requires the existence of space to contain it. When you imagine a void, you imagine a state of silence, but silence requires the existence of time for that silence to endure. And true nothingness, what philosophers call the absolute absence of all things, is likely a biological impossibility for the human mind to even conceive. Our thoughts are like fish trying to imagine life without water. We are so immersed in the fabric of space and time that we cannot envision a reality where they do not exist. This is the cognitive trap of the Big Bang. We treat it as a beginning because our linear brains require a before and an after, but the sources suggest that the nothing that preceded our universe was not a vacuum in the way we understand it. It was what physicists call a physical nothing, which is far stranger than a mere empty box. To see this more clearly, we can use an analogy found in the uploaded documents. Think of an ordinary room. If you remove the furniture and the people, you say the room is empty. But physics tells us the room is still full of air and light. If you pump out the air and block the light, you might think you have finally reached nothing. Yet even then, the walls of the room are made of atoms that quietly vibrate, releasing tiny bits of heat and energy into that emptiness. If you were to remove the walls themselves, you would still be left with the invisible machinery of the universe, the quantum fields that stretch across all of reality. These fields, the electromagnetic field, the Higgs field, and many others, cannot be switched off. They are woven into the very architecture of existence. Even in a state where there are no particles, no light, and no matter, these fields remain, jittering and fluctuating with a restless subterranean energy. This leads us to a disturbing implication that many original videos completely ignore. Nothing may be physically impossible. If existence is the default condition of reality, then the Big Bang was not a miracle of creation from a void, but a transition of states. According to the sources, the nothing before the Big Bang was actually a phase called inflation, a time when the universe was smaller than an atom but doubling in size so rapidly that it grew larger than the observable cosmos in less than a trillionth of a second. In this state, the universe was cold, desolate, and empty of everything but the energy of space itself. The nothing was a system under extreme tension, a dormant ledger of physical laws waiting for a trigger. This is the boot-up paradox. Instead of a physical explosion, some fringe theories and the law vault suggest we should view the Big Bang as a system initialization event. Imagine a computer before it is turned on. The screen is black, the speakers are silent, and to an outside observer there is nothing. But the code is already there, written into the hardware, waiting for the first pulse of electricity to bring the system to life. If the laws of physics, the fundamental constants like the speed of light or the strength of gravity, existed in the nothing before the first star was ever born, then we're forced to ask the most unsettling question of all: who or what wrote the code? Most to understand the absolute beginning, you must first understand the absolute limit of a direction. We are biologically hardwired to believe that every event has a predecessor, a before that explains the now. This is the comfort of causality, the steady heartbeat of a universe that makes sense. But as we approach the origin of everything, the heartbeat skips, and then it stops entirely. Stephen Hawking proposed a reality so counterintuitive that it effectively deletes the word before from the cosmic dictionary, replacing our linear history with a geometry that has no edge. He called it the no-boundary proposal, and to grasp it, you must leave the river of time behind and begin to think of existence as a map of the world. Imagine you're a traveller standing on the surface of the Earth, determined to walk as far south as the planet will allow. As you trek across the ice, the concept of south remains a reliable guide, a clear direction toward a destination. But the moment you reach the exact centre of the South Pole, something strange happens to the language of navigation. If you were to ask a fellow traveller, which way is south from here? The question would be met with a disturbing silence. There is no south of the South Pole. The direction hasn't been blocked by a wall or a cliff. Rather, the very concept of south has been exhausted by the geometry of the sphere. All lines of longitude meet at that single, smooth point, and every direction you could possibly take from that centre is, by definition, north. Hawking argued that the Big Bang is the South Pole of the universe. Our human intuition demands that there must be a before the Big Bang, just as a traveller might stubbornly believe there must be a patch of ice further south than the pole. But if the universe is truly a closed system, then asking what happened before the dawn of time is a question that simply loses its meaning within the defined coordinate system of reality. There was no before, because time did not exist in a form that could be measured as a preceding event. It is not that time was waiting in the wings to be born, it is that time itself was undergoing a radical structural transformation. The sources describe this transformation as the shift from real time to imaginary time. In our daily lives, time is a one-way street, a dimension that moves from the past toward the future, with a distinct mathematical sign that separates it from the dimensions of space. You can move left or right, up or down, but you are a prisoner to the forward flow of the clock. However, as we descend into the extreme pressures of the early universe, where the density of matter and the curvature of space-time become unimaginable, the distinction between space and time begins to dissolve. Hawking used the concept of imaginary time to show that, near the beginning, time stops behaving like a river and begins to behave exactly like another direction of space. This is the point where the documentary moves from physics into a form of geometric horror. If time becomes space, then the universe no longer has a beginning in the way a play has a first act. Instead, it is a four-dimensional object that simply exists. A smooth, rounded surface with no edge and no boundary. Think of a bowl. The bottom of the bowl is smooth. There is no sharp point, no jagged singularity where the ceramic starts. It just curves upward from a central point. If our universe is like that bowl, then the Big Bang was not an explosion from a point of infinite density, a singularity that breaks the laws of physics, but rather a smooth transition from a spatial geometry into a temporal one. This no-boundary state suggests that the universe is entirely self-contained. It does not require a creator to set the initial conditions, nor does it require a trigger from an external void. Like the surface of the Earth, it is finite but has no edge. You can travel across it forever and never fall off the end. But for the human mind, this is a psychological nightmare. Our brains are evolved to understand a world of predators and prey, of causes and effects. To be told that the universe had no cause, that it simply emerges as a statistical probability from a quantum wave function, attacks the very foundations of our logic. It suggests that the why we have been searching for might be a phantom born from our inability to see the four-dimensional shape of reality. Standard videos often treat the Big Bang as a singularity, a point where the laws of nature stop making sense. They describe it as a wall beyond which we cannot peer. But Hawking's proposal attempts to heal this wound in reality. By replacing the sharp point of the singularity with a smooth, rounded geometry, he suggests that there was never a moment of infinite density. There was only a region where time was not yet time. This means the nothing we imagined before the stars was not a void of non-existence. It was a state where time and space were indistinguishable, a frozen architecture of potential, that only began to flow forward as the universe expanded and cooled. If this theory is correct, it means the arrow of time we experience, the feeling of the past receding and the future approaching, is not a fundamental part of the universe. It is an emergent property, a direction we only began to perceive once the south pole of the universe was behind us. It implies that we are living inside a geometry that is already complete, a block universe, where every moment of your life, from your birth to the death of the last star, is just a coordinate on a map that has no edge. The nothingness before the Big Bang was simply the point where the mapmaker ran out of south. But as we leave the South Pole and move into the expanding reaches of the young cosmos, we find that the nothing of space is far from empty. The smoothness of Hawking's proposal hides a deeper, more restless truth. Even if we accept that there is no before, we must still confront the fact that the vacuum itself is humming with a terrifying invisible energy. We have escaped the trap of the beginning, only to fall into the restless void, a sea of virtual ghosts that pop in and out of existence beneath the floorboards of reality. The silence we imagined is about to be replaced by a roar of quantum activity that has been pushing against the fabric of space since the first second of existence. We have escaped the trap of the beginning, only to fall into a reality that is far more restless than the silence we were promised. If Hawking's proposal suggests that time behaves like a map with no edge, we must now ask what the map itself is made of. When you look into the deep black stretches between the galaxies, you believe you're looking at a void, a passive, empty stage where the stars are the only actors. But modern physics has a disturbing correction to offer. The stage is not empty, and it is not a background. In fact, the stage is alive, humming with a subterranean energy that refuses to be still, even when there's absolutely nothing there to move it. This is the restless void, a state of physical nothingness that is so active, so crowded with invisible machinery, that it challenges our very definition of what it means to exist. To understand this, we must first abandon the philosophical nothing, the absolute absence of space, time, and law, because science has found no evidence that such a state is even possible. Instead, we must confront the physical nothing, the quantum vacuum. If you were to take a region of space and meticulously strip it of every atom, every stray photon of light, and every wisp of dark matter, you would expect to find a perfect silent stillness. But you would be wrong. Even in its bare minimum state, the universe is filled with fields, the electromagnetic field, the Higgs field, and many others that stretch across the entire cosmos like an invisible, infinite web. These fields cannot be switched off. They're woven into the very architecture of existence. The horror of the vacuum lies in a fundamental rule of the universe called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. This rule forbids absolute stillness. Just as you cannot know both the exact position and momentum of a particle, a field cannot have an exactly defined value of zero energy for any length of time. To be perfectly calm would be to have zero uncertainty, and the universe does not allow that. Because of this, the vacuum is in a state of eternal effervescent jitter. It is like a calm-looking pond that, when viewed through a microscope, reveals a surface roiling with the collision of molecules. At the smallest scales of reality, the nothing of space is a churning sea of quantum fluctuations. Within this sea, something truly ghostly occurs. Pairs of particles and antiparticles, electrons and positrons, photons and antiphotons, are constantly popping into existence out of the absolute void. They are not created by an outside force. They are borrowed from the vacuum's own restless energy. They appear, they interact with the world for a trillionth of a second, and then they annihilate each other, returning their energy back to the void before the universe can even notice they were there. Physicists call these virtual particles. They are the bookkeeping entries of a universe that is constantly trying to balance its books, flickering in and out of being like static on a television screen. You might find it easy to dismiss these as mathematical tricks or theoretical ghosts, but their effects are as real as the floor beneath your feet. The most chilling proof of this activity is found in the Casimir effect. Imagine two uncharged parallel metal plates placed so close together in a vacuum that even a single hair could not fit between them. Classical logic tells us that since there is nothing between them, and nothing pushing them from the outside, they should remain perfectly still, but they don't. In laboratories, we have observed an invisible force that pushes these plates together. the explanation is as unsettling as the result. The nothing between the plates is too small to allow certain wavelengths of the vacuum's fluctuations to exist. Outside the plates, however, the roiling sea of the vacuum is unrestricted. This creates a pressure difference, an energy debt between the plates. The vacuum outside is literally more crowded with potential than the vacuum inside, and it pushes the metal together with the weight of its own ghostly activity. We have measured this force with exquisite precision, and every time it confirms the same terrifying truth. The void has weight. Empty space can exert physical pressure on the material world. This realization transforms the Big Bang from a singular miracle into a natural consequence of a restless system. If the vacuum is never truly empty and never truly still, then it is a staged area for creation. The nothing that existed before the stars was not a void waiting to be filled, but a medium with its own properties, its own history, and its own inherent instability. It is a state of pure potential that is constantly trying to break into something more. In fact, some theories suggest that the entire universe, the billions of galaxies, the trillions of stars, and every memory you have ever had, is nothing more than a macroscopic version of a virtual particle pair. We may be a giant quantum fluctuation that simply lasted long enough to wonder where it came from. But if the vacuum carries energy, and if particles can pop out of that energy for free, we must confront the law that governs all of reality. The law of conservation. You cannot get something for nothing, or can you? As we look deeper into the ledger of the cosmos, we find that the universe may be performing the ultimate accounting trick. The positive energy of matter and the negative energy of gravity may be perfectly balanced, hidden within the restless sea. We are about to see how a whole universe can cost exactly zero energy, and why the free lunch of existence is the only reason we're here to eat it. If the restless sea of the quantum vacuum is truly churning with invisible activity, we must confront the most fundamental rule of our reality, the law of conservation. We are biologically and culturally conditioned to believe that every object, every action, and every star carries a cost. In our everyday experience, you cannot move a mountain without expending energy, and you certainly cannot create a universe out of thin air without a massive pre-existing deposit in the cosmic bank. This is the comfort of the ledger, the belief that the universe is a closed system where energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transformed. But as we dig into the foundation of the Big Bang, we find a possibility that is both scientifically elegant and psychologically devastating. The universe may be the ultimate free lunch. To understand how 100 billion galaxies could cost absolutely nothing, we have to look at the universe as a grand accounting trick. Physicists describe this as the zero-energy universe hypothesis, an idea that suggests if you were to add up every single bit of energy in existence, the final sum wouldn't be a number of staggering proportions, it would be exactly zero. This means that the Big Bang didn't require a miracle or an external creator to provide an initial supply of energy. It only required a system that knew how to balance its books. The ledger of reality is split into two columns, the positive and the negative. In the positive column, we have everything we can see, touch, and measure. This is the energy of matter and radiation, the stars, the planets, the atoms in your body, and the light streaming through the void. Thanks to Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared, we know that mass is simply a highly concentrated form of energy. Every star is a massive reservoir of positive energy, a glowing testament to the abundance of the cosmos. If this were the only column in the ledger, the existence of the universe would be a massive violation of the laws of physics, a debt of infinite proportions with no way to pay it back. But there is a second column, one that is often invisible to our intuition, the negative energy of gravity. This is the dark debt of the universe. In physics, gravitational energy is defined as negative because gravity is an attractive force. Think of two massive objects far apart in the void. They have zero gravitational potential energy relative to each other. As they begin to pull closer, falling into each other's embrace, their potential energy decreases, dropping below zero into the negatives. Simultaneously, they speed up, gaining positive kinetic energy. The more they attract, the more negative their gravitational energy becomes, and the more positive their energy of motion grows. The two are locked in a perfect inverse dance where the total remains unchanged. When you apply this logic to the entire cosmos, the implications are staggering. The positive energy contained in the mass of every star and galaxy is perfectly cancelled out by the negative energy of the gravitational field that pulls them all together. Like a borrower who takes a loan of $1 million while simultaneously incurring $1 million in debt, the universe's net worth remains exactly zero. This is why the Big Bang could occur spontaneously from the nothing of the quantum vacuum. It didn't need to borrow energy from an outside source because it never actually spent anything to exist. This realization is the heart of the free lunch theory, popularized by physicists like Alan Guth. During the phase of cosmic inflation, the universe was doubling in size at a rate that defies human comprehension. As space expanded, it created more matter and more radiation, more positive energy. But as that space grew, the gravitational field also expanded, becoming more and more negative. The more stuff the universe created, the more debt it incurred in the form of gravity. The ledger grew to astronomical scales, but the bottom line never moved. The universe didn't need a creator to jumpstart the engine. It just needed the laws of physics to allow for a fluctuation that balanced its own existence. For the viewer, this is a moment of profound existential vertigo. We often search for a why behind our existence, assuming there must be a profound purpose or a divine cause for the sheer scale of the stars. But the zero-energy ledger suggests that we exist not because of a grand design, but because of a mathematical loophole. We are a high-stakes accounting error that managed to persist for 13.8 billion years. If the total energy of the universe is zero, then the universe is not a thing in the way we understand it. It is a structured version of nothingness. We are the vacuum experiencing itself through the lens of a perfectly balanced equation. This creates what the law vault identifies as a cognitive instability in our reality. If existence is free, then why is it so rare? Why did the ledger balance in just the right way to allow for carbon-based life and stable stars? Some point to the anthropic principle, suggesting that we only observe this specific zero-cost balance because it is the only one that allows for observers to exist in the first place. But this answer only deepens the mystery. If the universe is just a fluctuation that costs nothing, then there may be an infinite number of other ledgers out there. Universes where the books didn't balance, where gravity was too strong or matter was too weak, and the nothing simply returned to silence before a single star could blink into being. The most disturbing implication, however, is that if we are a zero-energy fluctuation, then we are inherently unstable. Just as a virtual particle must eventually return its borrowed energy to the vacuum, our entire universe may be a temporary loan from the void. We are living in the space between the borrower and the lender, a brief moment of complexity in a reality that, at its core, is still absolutely empty. The silence we imagined before the Big Bang didn't disappear. It simply split itself into the positive energy of our lives and the negative energy of the gravity that will eventually pull us back into the dark. But as we look at the cosmic ledger, we start to see that some entries don't quite fit the standard model. There are ghosts in the data, structures so massive and so ancient that they seem to have been inherited from a previous universe entirely. If the ledger balances perfectly for our universe, what happens to the debts and assets of the one that came before? We are about to move from the mathematics of the free lunch to the physical evidence of the leviathans of the previous aeon, structures that shouldn't exist but are sitting there in the dark waiting to be found. If the universe truly is a zero-energy ledger where everything balances to nothing, then we are forced to confront a new, more haunting discrepancy. There appear to be ghosts in the data. According to the most fundamental rules of modern cosmology, specifically the cosmological principle, the universe should be roughly the same everywhere you look. On the larger scales, matter should be distributed like a fine, even mist, with no single structure growing large enough to dominate the horizon. Our current model suggests that the absolute limit for any coherent structure in the cosmos should be around 1 billion light-years across. Anything larger would be a mathematical impossibility, a violation of the smoothness required for our Big Bang story to work. Yet, as our telescopes peer deeper into the ancient dark, they have begun to find leviathans that shouldn't exist. In 2024, researchers identified a massive ring-shaped pattern of galaxies and clusters spanning a staggering 1.3 billion light-years in diameter, dubbed the Big Ring. Nearby, another colossal structure known as the Giant Arc stretches across 3.3 billion light-years of space. To grasp the scale of these anomalies, consider that if you could see them with the naked eye, they would appear 15 times wider than a full moon in the night sky. They are so immense and so highly structured that they cannot be explained as mere statistical flukes or random clumps of matter. They are leviathans of the previous aeon, theory-defying anomalies that suggest our universe is not the first, but merely the latest child of a much older parent. This brings us to one of the most radical and psychologically unsettling theories in the history of science: conformal cyclic cosmology, or CCC, proposed by the renowned physicist Sir Roger Penrose. Penrose suggests that our Big Bang was not a beginning of time, but a transition, a bridge between two cosmic eons. In this framework, the universe does not simply begin and end, it reincarnates. But the nature of this reincarnation is not a gentle rebirth. It is a terrifying transformation born from the total decay of everything we have ever known. To understand Penrose's vision, we must look far into our own future, past the death of the stars and the freezing of the galaxies. Eventually, the universe will reach a state of absolute heat death. The last black holes will evaporate into a faint mist of Hawking radiation, and every bit of matter, every atom, every proton, will eventually decay. At this point, the universe will be empty of everything except massless particles like photons, moving through an infinite dark void. This is where the geometric horror of the theory takes hold. Without matter, there are no clocks. Without clocks, there is no way for the universe to track the passage of time. And without mass, there is no sense of scale. To a massless particle, large and small are identical. Penrose argues that in this final empty state, the geometry of the infinitely expanded cold future of one universe becomes mathematically identical to the infinitely small hot beginning of the next. When the universe loses its sense of size, the nothingness of a dead cosmos becomes the singularity of a new Big Bang. This suggests a terrifying new perspective on our own origins. Our Big Bang was not a miracle of creation, but merely the exhaust of a previous universe's death. We are the leftover radiation, the thermal residue of a reality that existed for trillions of years before our stars were even a possibility. The Big Ring and the Giant Arc are not just random clusters of galaxies, they may be fossil imprints, the ghosts of gravitational waves or massive structures inherited from that previous aeon, carved into the fabric of our space before time as we know it even began. If this theory is correct, then the nothing before the Big Bang was actually a something, so vast it exceeds the limits of human chronology. It means we are living inside a cemetery of cosmic proportions, built from the ashes of a world that forgot itself. Standard science videos often treat the Big Bang as a birth, but Penrose's cyclic cosmology frames it as a cosmic recycling, a process where the end and the beginning are the same point on a circle that never stops turning. But there is a darker implication hidden within this cycle. If the universe has been through infinite aeons, then every possible configuration of matter has already happened. Every life you could have lived, every version of history has already played out in the previous rotations of the cosmic wheel. And more disturbingly, if these massive structures like the Big Ring are imprints from a parent universe, we must ask, what was that parent like? Was it a stable world like ours, or was it a chaotic realm where the laws of physics were broken and alien? Some researchers believe they have already seen evidence of this previous world in the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the sky. Penrose has claimed to find concentric circular patterns in this ancient radiation, ripples that he interprets as the imprints of catastrophic gravitational events, like the collision of supermassive black holes that occurred before our Big Bang ever happened. While most cosmologists remain skeptical, the existence of structures like the Big Ring forces us to keep the door open to the impossible. If we are seeing objects that are too large to exist under our current laws, then our laws are incomplete, and our timeline is missing its first few trillion years. This realization shifts the documentary from a study of the beginning into an infinite excavation of reality. We thought we were digging for the start of time, but we have instead found the floorboards of a previous house. We are realizing that the silence we imagined before the stars was actually the roar of a dying cosmos. The Big Bang was simply the moment the pressure of a dead universe became so great that it had no choice but to reboot into us. But as we accept that our universe has a parent, we must face the next logical step in this escalating spiral of cosmic horror. If one universe can give birth to another through the exhaust of its own death, then what is to stop this process from happening everywhere, all at once? We're about to move from the idea of a single parent to the concept of an eternal universe factory, a reality that is perpetually foaming with big bangs, creating an infinite multiverse where the very idea of a unique existence is completely destroyed. We have moved from the idea of a singular parent universe to something far more industrial and unsettling. If Penrose's cyclic cosmology suggested our Big Bang was the exhaust of a previous death, then modern inflationary theory suggests that we are not a unique event at all. Instead, we are merely one bubble in a vast, unending froth of creation, a byproduct of a process that has no intention of stopping. This is the eternal universe factory, a reality that is perpetually foaming with big bangs, and it represents a shift from the mystery of our origins to the horror of our own insignificance. To understand how reality can manufacture infinite universes, we must return to the first fraction of a second after the beginning, the phase known as inflation. Standard cosmology tells us that the universe underwent a breathtaking expansion, doubling in size at least 80 times in a fraction of a second, fueled by a mysterious energy that permeated empty space itself. Usually, we're taught that this inflation stopped everywhere at once, dumping its energy into space to create the hot, dense soup of particles we call the Big Bang. But a more disturbing possibility, supported by the mathematics of the inflaton field, suggests that inflation is not a one-time event that happens in unison. In many models, the energy field driving this expansion does not decay uniformly. Because of the inherent randomness of quantum mechanics, the field fluctuates. In some patches of space, the energy drops, inflation ends, and a universe like ours is born, filled with stars and galaxies. But in other regions, the field fluctuates to a higher energy state, causing inflation to continue. Because the rate of expansion during inflation is so incredibly rapid, the regions that keep inflating grow exponentially faster than the regions that stop. The result is an endlessly branching tree of space. Even as our own bubble universe expands and cools over billions of years, the space outside our horizon is still inflating, still doubling in size every trillionth of a second, and still spawning new bubble universes. This transforms the Big Bang from a miracle of creation into a localized weather event in a much larger, eternally turbulent cosmos. Physicists call this the cosmic foam, a reality where Big Bangs are popping into existence like bubbles in a boiling pot of water, forever and in every direction. The nothing before the Big Bang was never a void. It was a state of eternal inflation, a self-perpetuating machine that has been generating realities for an eternity and may never truly shut down. The horror of this scale is not just in the numbers, but in the variety. Each bubble universe produced by this factory is likely to have its own unique set of physical laws. In our universe, the constants of nature, the strength of gravity, the speed of light, the mass of an electron appear to be finely tuned to allow for the existence of stars and life. But in the eternal universe factory, there is no tuner. Every physically possible configuration of laws is realized somewhere in the foam. Imagine a universe where gravity is so strong that it collapses back into a singularity before the first atom can form. Imagine another where the electromagnetic force is too weak for electrons to bind to nuclei, leaving the cosmos as a featureless, cold mist of particles that can never build chemistry or life. In the infinite reach of the multiverse, there are universes with 4, 5, or 10 large spatial dimensions, where orbital mechanics are so unstable that planets are instantly flung into the dark or spiral into their suns. There are universes made of particles we have no names for, governed by alien forces that would make our logic crumble. We only observe our specific, stable balance, because it is the only one that allows an observer to exist and ask the question in the first place. But as we embrace the infinite, the psychological weight becomes even more disturbing. If space is truly infinite and the factory is eternal, then according to the laws of probability, everything that can happen will happen an infinite number of times. This is the horror of uniqueness destroyed. In some distant region of the foam, there is another bubble identical to ours, containing another Earth, another Milky Way, and another version of you. In fact, there are an infinite number of yous. There is a version of you who is a king, a version who never existed, and a version who is currently screaming in a universe where the laws of physics are breaking apart as you read this. This idea, often discussed in Reddit and philosophy communities as a cosmic foam machine, suggests that our individual lives, our history, and our entire 13.8 billion year timeline are not a grand narrative, but a statistical inevitability in a factory that values quantity over quality. The nothing before the Big Bang was not a silent room. It was the roar of an endless assembly line. Standard scientific documentaries often treat this as a wonder of modern physics, but the Law Vault identifies it as a phase of cognitive instability. If every possible conscious experience is happening somewhere right now, then the idea of a choice or a destiny becomes a hollow hallucination. We are living in a reality that is so vast it exceeds biological comprehension, optimized not for truth or for us, but for survival within our own little bubble. We have moved beyond the before and into the infinite, realizing that our Big Bang was just one tiny flicker of light in an eternal storm. But as we look at the infinite foaming of universes, a new and even more terrifying paradox begins to emerge from the chaos. If the vacuum is truly infinite and lasts forever, then we must confront a statistical nightmare that suggests your own brain is more likely to be a lie than the stars you see in the sky. We're about to descend into the Boltzmann brain paradox, where the very reliability of your memories and your reality is put on trial by the laws of entropy. We have moved beyond the before and into the infinite, realizing that our Big Bang was just one tiny flicker of light in an eternal storm. But as we look at the infinite foaming of universes, a new and even more terrifying paradox begins to emerge from the chaos. If the vacuum is truly infinite and lasts forever, then we must confront a statistical nightmare that suggests your own brain is more likely to be a lie than the stars you see in the sky. This is the Boltzmann brain paradox, a phase of what the Law Vault calls cognitive instability, where the very reliability of your memories and your reality is put on trial by the laws of entropy. To grasp this emotional climax of our excavation, you must first accept the cold, hard logic of the second law of thermodynamics. The universe prefers disorder over order. In our current model of history, the universe began in a state of extremely low entropy, an incredibly organized, hot and dense point. For 13.8 billion years, that order has been slowly decaying, spreading out into the complex web of galaxies, stars, and biological life we see today. We view our existence as the result of a long, stable, and protective history, a grand narrative that required billions of years of cosmic evolution to produce the specific atoms that make up your mind. But the sources reveal a disturbing alternative rooted in the restless nature of the quantum vacuum. If the nothing before the Big Bang is truly an eternal field of fluctuating energy, then we have been calculating the odds of our existence all wrong. Think back to the restless sea of the vacuum we explored earlier, where virtual particles are constantly popping into existence out of the static. Usually these are just tiny jitters, but the laws of probability state that if you wait long enough in an infinite void, any configuration of matter, no matter how complex, will eventually fluctuate into being. This includes everything from a single hydrogen atom to an entire functioning human brain. This brings us to the statistical horror of scale. It is vastly easier for the vacuum to sneeze out a single lone brain than it is for it to manufacture a whole stable universe that lasts for 13 billion years. In the mathematics of entropy, a lone brain appearing in the dark is a small fluctuation, while a Big Bang is a massive one. Because small fluctuations are exponentially more likely than large ones, the implication is devastating. If the universe is part of an infinite, eternal foam, then most observers in reality are not naturally evolved biological entities like you believe yourself to be. Instead, most observers are Boltzmann brains, conscious entities that fluctuated out of the chaos a second ago, complete with a full set of fabricated memories of a childhood, a planet, and a history that never actually happened. This is the point where the documentary transforms from a science lesson into a direct confrontation with your own sanity. The sources describe this as a state of cognitive instability because if this theory is true, you have no way of proving that you are real. Every piece of evidence you have for the existence of the outside world, the light hitting your eyes, the feel of the chair beneath you, the memory of the previous chapters of this video, is just a pattern of electrical signals inside a brain that might be floating in a dark, empty void. You feel like you have a past because your brain is currently wired with that information, but in a Boltzmann-dominated cosmology, that past is just a statistical accident of the static. The horror of the Boltzmann brain nightmare is that it makes science and observation itself unreliable. If your mind is a random fluctuation, then your ability to use logic or perform experiments is also a random fluctuation. You cannot trust your thoughts because they were not built by the slow, corrective process of evolution. They were simply assembled by a chaotic jitter in the nothingness before time. Online philosophy communities have become obsessed with this idea because it suggests that the universe may not require a stable history at all. It only requires a temporary moment of consciousness to observe it. Standard documentaries often ignore this law gap because it is too disturbing to address, but it represents a fundamental break in our understanding of reality. We find ourselves trapped in a paradox of our own existence. If we trust our observations of a 13 billion-year-old universe, we are led to the theory of eternal inflation. But if eternal inflation is true, then our observations of that universe are likely a hallucination produced by a Boltzmann fluctuation. We are caught in a hall of mirrors where the nothing before the Big Bang is not just a void of space, but a void of truth. Imagine yourself for a moment as that lone brain, drifting in the absolute silence of a dead aeon. You have just enough time to feel a sense of wonder, to remember the face of a loved one, and to ponder the mystery of the Big Bang before the laws of entropy reclaim you. In a trillionth of a second, the fluctuation will end, your consciousness will dissolve back into the quantum sea, and the nothing will return to its restless, empty jitter. This is the ultimate existential dread, the possibility that we are not the masters of our destiny, but the temporary exhaust of a cosmic counting error. Yet, even as we reel from the realization that our memories might be fabrications of the void, some physicists refuse to let the darkness win. They argue that there must be a way out of this cognitive instability, a reason why a stable, structured universe is the only reality we can truly inhabit. To find that answer, we must move beyond the point of the Big Bang and look at the structure of the higher dimensions that might be containing us. If we are not a fluctuation in a vacuum, then perhaps we are the result of a massive collision in a fifth dimension we cannot see. We are about to move from the horror of the brain to the violent majesty of brain collisions in the fifth dimension, where the Big Bang was not a whisper, but a cataclysmic clap of cosmic sheets. We have spent our journey thus far excavating the internal ruins of the beginning, digging through the layers of quantum noise and the statistical nightmares of the void. We have confronted the possibility that our memories are fabrications, and that our entire history is a high-stakes accounting error. But to truly understand what existed before the stars, we must now perform the ultimate act of perspective. We must move beyond the point of the Big Bang entirely. For over a century, we have been told that the universe began as an infinitesimal speck of infinite density, a singularity that represents the final wall of human logic. But what if that point was never a point at all? What if what we perceive as a singular beginning was merely a localized event within a much grander multi-dimensional cosmic ballet? To find the answer, we must step out of our three-dimensional reality and look at the structure of the higher dimensions that may be containing us. We are about to move from the horror of the brain to the violent majesty of brain collisions in the fifth dimension, where the Big Bang was not a whisper, but a cataclysmic clap of cosmic sheets. To grasp this radical shift, you must first abandon the idea that our universe is everything. Instead, imagine that all of space, every galaxy, every star, every atom, is confined to a three-dimensional sheet, a membrane that physicists call a brain. In this framework, our familiar reality is like a single page in a vast infinite book. We can move left or right, up or down, and forward or back along the surface of this page, but we are fundamentally unaware of the dimensions extending away from it. This higher dimensional space, the vast room in which our page is floating, is known as the bulk. Most theories of string and M theory suggest that this bulk is not just a void, but a complex five-dimensional arena that hosts other brains, other universes, floating just a fraction of a millimeter away from us in a direction we cannot see or touch. This leads us to the ekpyrotic theory, a name derived from the ancient Greek word for conflagration, or cosmic fire. In this model, the Big Bang was not a sudden explosion from a point of nothingness. It was a transition, a violent reheating of our brain caused by a collision. Imagine two of these cosmic sheets floating parallel to each other in the bulk. They are not static. they are drawn together by an invisible gravitational attraction. For trillions of years, they move toward each other through the fifth dimension. During this approach phase, our brain is cold, empty, and nearly flat. The nothingness we imagined before the stars was actually this long, silent period of anticipation, where the vacuum was simply the gap between two colliding worlds. As the distance between the brains closes, the gravitational interaction between them becomes an irresistible force, causing them to accelerate toward one another. The climax of this process is the cosmic conflagration, the moment the two sheets finally touch. This is the clap of the universe. This collision is not a gentle contact. It is a high-energy impact that converts the immense kinetic energy of the moving brains into the hot, dense soup of matter and radiation that we call the Big Bang. The fire we see in the oldest light in the sky is the thermal residue of this impact, the friction of two universes striking each other in a dimension we are biologically incapable of perceiving. This theory provides a hauntingly elegant solution to the lore gaps that standard documentaries often ignore. For instance, why is the universe so smooth and flat? Standard cosmology requires a period of inflation to stretch out the wrinkles of the early universe, but the ekpyrotic model argues that the wrinkles were never there to begin with. The long, slow contraction before the collision squeezed out the irregularities, making the brain perfectly flat at the moment of impact. The nothing before the Big Bang was a period of preparation, a cosmic grooming that ensured the resulting universe would be stable enough to host stars and life. But more disturbingly, this framework addresses the hierarchy problem, one of the deepest mysteries in physics. Why is gravity so extraordinarily weak compared to the other forces of nature? You can overcome the gravitational pull of the entire Earth just by lifting a paperclip with a small magnet. The sources suggest that while the forces that govern our lives, electromagnetism and the nuclear forces, are stuck to our three-dimensional brain, gravity is different. Gravity is a manifestation of the curvature of space-time itself, which means it can leak into the extra dimensions of the bulk. We experience gravity as weak because its strength is diluted, spread out across a larger, higher dimensional space. We are feeling only a faint three-dimensional shadow of a force that is far more powerful in the fifth dimension. This leak suggests an even more unsettling possibility found in the lore vault: shadow brains. If gravity can travel between brains, then we might be feeling the tug of matter that exists in a parallel universe right next to ours. This could be the true identity of dark matter. We see its gravitational influence, we see it pulling on our galaxies, but we can never find the particles themselves because they aren't in our universe at all. They're on a shadow brain, a hidden world floating just a heartbeat away in the bulk, interacting with us only through the ghostly touch of gravity. The horror of the ekpyrotic model is its recursive nature. After the collision, the brains bounce apart, expand and cool. This is the phase of history we are living in now. But as the universe continues to expand and become increasingly dilute, the forces within the bulk will eventually draw the brains back together. This sets the stage for the next collision, the next Big Bang, and the next cycle of cosmic evolution. We are caught in an endless loop of cosmic fire and ice, a bounce that replaces the singularity with a transition that has no beginning and no end. Standard documentaries treat the Big Bang as a singular miracle, a one-time birth from a void. But the theory of brain collisions transforms it into a recurring physical process, a heartbeat of the bulk that has been pulsing for an eternity. The nothing before the Big Bang was not a room waiting for a light to be turned on. It was the silence between two claps. We have moved from being a statistical accident in a vacuum to being the exhaust of a higher dimensional impact. But if our universe is merely a system that reboots every few trillion years, we must ask the final, most disturbing question. Is this cycle natural, or is it a design? If the laws of physics are the code that allows these brains to collide and create life, who wrote that code? We're about to move from the violent majesty of the fifth dimension to the recursive boot-up, where we explore the possibility that the Big Bang was not an accident of geometry, but a system initialization for a reality that is far more artificial than we dare to imagine. We're about to enter the Hall of Mirrors. We have looked at the violent collision of sheets in the fifth dimension and the statistical nightmares of brains appearing in the dark. But as we descend into the final layers of this excavation, we must confront a possibility that is perhaps more disturbing than any physical explosion. What if the Big Bang was never a material event but a digital one? We are entering the realm of the recursive boot-up, where the nothing before the stars is reimagined not as a void of space, but as a dormant state of code waiting for a system initialization. To understand this, we must look past the matter and energy of our universe and look instead at the rules that govern them. If you strip away the galaxies and the atoms, you are left with the fundamental laws of physics, the constant speed of light, the strength of gravity, and the charge of an electron. In standard documentaries, these laws are treated as just being there, but in the framework of recursive reality, these laws are the operating system of existence. This brings us back to the analogy of a computer before it is turned on. The screen is black, the speakers are silent, and to any observer there is nothing. Yet the code is already there, etched into the hardware, waiting for the first pulse of electricity to bring the entire system to life. If the laws of physics existed in the nothing before the first star was ever born, we are forced to ask the most unsettling question of our entire journey. Who or what wrote the code? This is the point where cosmology merges with simulation theory, a concept that has migrated from science fiction into the heart of theoretical physics. The law vault identifies this as a massive law gap, ignored by competitors who treat the Big Bang as a natural, stable progression. If the universe is a system that booted up, then the Big Bang was not a birth, but a system initialization event. This implies that our reality was configured with specific parameters, a finely tuned set of constants that allowed for the complexity of life to emerge. In a natural universe, this fine-tuning is an incredible coincidence. In a programmed one, it is design choice. The horror of this initialization lies in the recursive mirror. If we are living in a system that was booted up, it is highly likely that we are not the first such system. As civilizations within a universe grow in complexity, they eventually begin to build their own simulations, computational realities so detailed that they contain their own conscious observers. Eventually, those observers develop their own technology and build their own simulations, and the cycle repeats endlessly. This creates a hall of mirrors where the Big Bang of one universe is simply the moment a computer in a parent universe reached the end of its loading screen. For the human mind, this recursion is a source of profound cognitive instability. We search for the base layer of reality, the final wall where existence truly begins, but the recursive mirror suggests there may not be one. Every nothing we find is just the floorboards of a previous house, and every Big Bang is just a localized initialization in an infinite chain of processing. We are living in a reality that may be endlessly generating itself, an infinite loop where the question of what came before is as meaningless as asking what is south of the South Pole, not because time is geometry, but because the code has no beginning. This recursive framework explains why the universe appears to be so structure-heavy and mathematically consistent. Mathematics is not just a tool we use to describe the world, it is the substrate upon which the world is built. Some theorists propose a level 4 multiverse, where every mathematically consistent structure corresponds to a real existing universe. In this view, the nothing before the Big Bang was a state of pure mathematical potential, a sea of equations that had not yet been solved by a physical initialization. We are the result of a specific set of equations being run through the cosmic processor. However, if we are a system that booted up, we must also face the possibility of a system shutdown. Just as a computer can be turned off, some fringe theories suggest that the nothing we fear is not only our origin, but our inevitable destination. This brings a new meaning to the heat death of the universe. Perhaps the fading of the stars and the evaporation of black holes is simply the system running out of resources, a gradual winding down of the simulation as the parent civilization loses interest, or the hardware fails. The silence we imagine before the dawn may be the same silence that waits for us at the end of the program. The psychological weight of the recursive boot-up is the realization that we may never know if we are the masters of our own destiny, or merely an experiment inside an endless machine. We have moved from being a statistical accident in a vacuum to being the data of a higher dimensional processor. The nothingness before the Big Bang was the period of anticipation before the system was triggered, a dormant state of laws that were already complete before the first photon was ever allowed to exist. But as we stand in this hall of mirrors, we must realize that every scientific answer we have found has only led us to a deeper, more disturbing question. We have dug through the vacuum, the energy ledgers, the previous aeons, and the fifth dimension, only to find ourselves looking into our own eyes in the reflection of a recursive mirror. We have reached the final wall of our excavation. In our concluding chapter, we will confront the ultimate limits of human logic and the most unsettling discovery of all: the possibility that nothing never existed, and we are trapped in an unavoidable infinite loop of existence from which there is no escape. We are about to touch the final wall. We have reached the absolute limit of our mental excavation, standing at the edge of what we call the beginning, only to find that the wall we expected to hit is not there. Our journey has taken us through the south pole of time, where the map of existence ran out of direction, and into the restless sea of the vacuum where the void itself had weight. We have looked into the recursive mirrors of simulated realities and watched higher dimensional sheets collide to ignite the stars, yet with every answer we have uncovered, we find ourselves staring at a deeper, more unsettling mystery. This is the point where our journey moves beyond physics and enters the realm of the final wall, a state where our very logic begins to fail us. The Law Vault identifies this as a confrontation with the ultimate limits of human logic, a realization that our brains were never actually designed to understand the fundamental nature of reality. Evolution optimized our minds for survival, to find food, avoid predators, and navigate a linear world of causes and effects, not to process the infinite architecture of cosmic origins. As we stand at this final threshold, we must confront the most disturbing possibility of all, that the nothing we have been searching for has never actually existed. Throughout this excavation, every time we attempted to reach absolute nothingness, we failed. We stripped away the galaxies, the atoms, and even the time and space that contained them, only to find hidden structures, quantum fields, and dormant physical laws vibrating beneath the surface. The nothingness we imagined before the Big Bang was not an empty void, but a state of pure potential, a system under extreme tension waiting for a trigger. Modern cosmology suggests that emptiness is not a blank page, but the ink itself, always present even when we cannot see the patterns it forms. This leads to an unsettling reversal of our deepest intuition. Instead of existence being a rare miracle that emerged from a void, existence itself appears to be the default condition of reality. This realization creates a state of profound cognitive instability. If nothing is physically impossible, then there was never a moment of true silence, and there will never be an end to the roar of existence. We find ourselves trapped in an unavoidable infinite loop, a reality that may be endlessly generating itself through bounces, cycles, or recursive initializations. We search for the base layer of reality, the final floorboard where the story truly begins, but the recursive mirror suggests that every beginning we find is just the floor of a previous house. The question of what came before may lose its meaning not because time didn't exist, but because the code of existence has no beginning and no end. We are not living in a grand narrative with a first act. We are living inside a geometry that is already complete, a block universe where every moment of your life is just a coordinate on a map that has no edge. Every scientific answer we have explored merely reveals a deeper, more disturbing question. If the universe is a zero-energy ledger, why are the laws of accounting so precise? If our Big Bang was the exhaust of a previous universe's death, what dictated the rules of that prior aeon? If we are a simulation, who or what wrote the operating system of existence? Science has pushed the horizon of our knowledge back to the first fraction of a second, yet the ultimate why remains just as elusive as it was when we first looked at the stars. It is as if we're digging through an infinite pile of sand, finding more complex and beautiful grains with every layer, but never reaching the ground. The psychological weight of this final wall is the realization that the mystery itself may be the emotional climax of our existence. We are the universe's way of experiencing its own restless vacuum, a brief moment of complexity in a reality that, at its core, is a structured version of nothingness. But our ability to understand that structure is limited by the very biology that allows us to ask the question. We are like fish trying to understand the concept of dry land while forever immersed in the water of space and time. The most unsettling discovery isn't that we came from nothing, it's that we are part of an infinite structural loop from which there is no escape and no outside. Standard documentaries often attempt to provide a sense of closure, a final theory that ties the beginning to the end, but the truth is far more ambiguous. The Big Bang was not a birth, but a transition. The void was not empty, but full. And you are not a unique individual, but a statistical inevitability in an eternal factory of realities. We leave you not with a resolution, but with a sense of existential vertigo. We are the exhaust of a dying cosmos, the jitter of a quantum sea, and the data of a recursive mirror. The silence we imagine before the dawn is the same silence that waits for us at the end of the program, a silence that is never truly still. Tonight, we have touched the final wall and felt it vibrate with the energy of a reality that refuses to be explained away. We are trapped in the heartbeat of an eternal process, living in the space between the borrower and the lender, waiting for our borrowed energy to be returned to the void. The story of the universe is not finished, and perhaps it never can be, because the questions we ask are the very thing that keeps the loop turning. As you drift towards sleep, remember that the nothing you fear is only a hallucination, and the something you are is just a highly structured version of the silence that has always been there. You're not separate from the void, you're the void finally opening its eyes.